right, this is designed to be drawn on a larger piece of paper by 11 inches by 17 inches. I am fairly sure that you probably don't have paper like that in the house. If you do, get it. Blank paper, no lines. If you don't have that, just a regular A4 size paper will be fine, but make sure you keep in mind that you're about to draw a lot on it, so the size of everything you draw should be smaller. So what we're going to simulate is the effects of industrialization on the rural and urban landscape. Um, Imagine that it's 1700 and we're in England. Remember that the Industrial Revolution started in England, and do you remember why? Hopefully you're nodding and you're saying yes, because of resources. There was a lot of coal there. Coal provided energy. Coal provided electricity and power. So it started there, and then as they discovered how to transport things, creating steel, creating railroad tracks, they could transport coal to other places and create the Industrial Revolution all over the world. It started in England, then it moved to France, and then in the Netherlands, and then rippled effect out into Germany, the rest of Western Europe, and the United States. And those countries that industrialized first are now the core countries in our current economic situation, because they have moved from being primary sector economies before industrialization. Then they industrialized and became secondary sector economies. And then they post-industrialized. After industrialization, they became service economies and above. And they have moved all the industry into places like China that are now industrial but are trying to become service. So it's a process for each country. So this is what we're going to draw today. This is the key. And this is about the size that you would use if you were using 11 by 17 paper. But since you're using 8.5 by 11, you'll probably want to go a little smaller than this. Yes? I suggest that you do your own key. You pause the video and you do your own key on a piece of paper. You don't have to do exactly this, but you do have to create a key if you don't do exactly this. So this is what everything is going to look like that you draw. Pause the video at any time to draw. I'm just going to talk right on through, so you're probably going to press pause a lot because you will have to be doing a lot of drawing. Okay, so the first thing, please do this in pencil, and lightly in pencil, because you're going to start erasing some things. You're going to have to knock some buildings down eventually. So first I want you to draw a river across your paper, connecting the east to the west, right? It's going to be a horizontal river along a longitude line. It does not have to be straight. It can be curvy, but it should go from the west side of your paper, which would be your left side of the paper, to the east side of the paper. I want your paper to be landscape, not portrait, so that it is longer across than it is up and down. So draw your river. Your river should be about 1 inch wide. It should be the main feature of your growing city. And why is the river the main feature of your growing city? Because, yes, hopefully, it's funny to talk to nobody. Rivers were where cities grew up because they needed them for agriculture and food and fishing, and then eventually for transportation. Now draw a simple wooden bridge crossing the river, and then connect that bridge to a road running north and south. It can be curvy, it can be straight, it's up to you. You get to draw the road. Then also draw a road that runs east and west, up to you where you put it. Draw 10 houses, 1 church, 1 cemetery, 1 store, 1 pub, 1 coal mine, and at least 25 trees. At this point, pause the video and do not continue until you have drawn these things. So here's the background for your small little hamlet in England. Life here in our rural English village is similar to other villages throughout Europe in the 18th century. Change traditionally comes very slowly. People moved at a much slower pace and had access to very little information about the world outside their village. London, England, England's largest city, was one of the 2 real cities in Europe that had a population of about 750,000 in 1750. 3 out of every 4 Englishmen were rural and lived in small villages like the one you've just drawn. The average village was inhabited by about 200 to 400 people. The tallest structure in the village was the church. The religion of England, remember, is Anglican, Church of England, Protestant. Home life and work life were very closely integrated, as most work was done in nearby fields or perhaps in an adjoining workshop, cottage industries, if you'll remember. The family was an economic unit as well as a social Every member of the family worked very hard from sun up to sundown. Even small children had chores. The homes of villagers were very small, with earthen floors and inadequate lighting and ventilation. All members of the family slept in the same room and sometimes shared living quarters with the livestock. Sons worked with their fathers farming and tending livestock, while daughters worked with their mothers cleaning, cooking, sewing, and other domestic chores. Life expectancy was slightly over 40 years of age. Most people married in their teens and had babies before they were 20. It was common for women to die during childbirth, so the average marriage lasted about 15 years. Stepmothers and stepfathers were very common. One baby out of 3 died before their first birthday, and only one child in 2 saw their 21st birthday. So in your head, I hope you're thinking demographic transition model here, right? Unlike France, the English were not rigidly divided into social or legal estates. However, there was a distinct social class system. Most English were poor farmers. A few were middle class like the bourgeoisie of France. They lived, for the most part, in London, these middle class did. Still, a small few were aristocrats, and they usually owned large tracts of land in the English countryside. For both peasants and aristocrats, the soil was the key economy, primary economy. Make our living off the land. Land was the source of livelihood and well-being. Having enough land to produce adequate food or to produce enough to sell or even rent was the key to economic survival. What's it called when you farm to eat? Subsistence agriculture. I hope you are answering me when I ask you questions. Traditions concerning land guided daily living. These traditions were designed to ensure the stability and welfare of the greater community. Hence, marriages and inheritance were geared to maintaining family property intact. You didn't marry for love in this day and age. Marriages were always arranged by the parents to maintain or better the economic status of their sons or daughters. Not everybody could get married, however. A man had to generally own land on which to support a family before he dared to marry. It was not uncommon for men to wait until their 30s when they inherited property from their parents, which enabled them to marry. If a woman did not bring land into the marriage, she had to have some kind of dowry. Dowry is money to provide to the marriage. Daughters who inherited property from their parents had to pass it on to their husbands. All land was given to the eldest son, it's called primogeniture, while younger sons might receive cash payments or wait for their older brother to die. The main occupation in England was farming. Private and public lands were not separated by fences as they are today. Remember what separated the private and public land by fences? That was called the Enclosure Acts. Every village had a public area called the Commons. This was land which was available to anyone for pasturing, hunting, gathering of firewood, growing crops, etc. So for poor farmers who did not own their own land or rented, they could eke out a marginal living by depending on the commons. That means they could just get by with the land that was common land. Unlike France, most English peasants or farmers did own their land, however small. Villages were connected by a system of dirt roads that became almost impassable during the wet season. As a result, transportation was often slow and trade beyond the village was not easy. Most English farmers never visited any place farther than 25 miles from their birthplace, ever. People made their own food, clothes, furniture, tools, and they even built their own houses. A few items which could not be produced could be obtained from wandering peddlers who went from village to village and also brought the news with them. Finally, for fuel, there were 2 sources, firewood and coal. Firewood was located on what ring of the von Thunen model? Yeah, that second ring. Good. Nearly every English village had a coal mining operation. These mines employed a small number of village dwellers, especially in the winter. Coal pits from which coal was extracted belonged to the owner of the property where the coal mine was situated. So over the next 100 years that we're going to cover in this simulation, a revolution as significant as the Neolithic Revolution, that's the first agricultural revolution, when early man turned from hunting and gathering to agriculture, this will completely change life in the little village you just drew on your paper. Some historians believe this revolution, the Industrial Revolution or the Second Agricultural Revolution, is the most fundamental change in human history. All right, round one. It is now 1745. England's geography is unique in that no section of the country is more than 90 miles from the sea, and there are many navigable rivers, that means you can sail on them, that crisscross the countryside. An enterprising young capitalist, that would mean you're trying to make some money, you decide to invest money in the construction of a canal. This is not a public venture, but rather a private one. You're digging it to make money off of it. The profits from your canal are astonishing. For example, one canal built in 1745, the Oxford Canal, yielded a 300% annual return for its investors for a period of more than 30 years. So this new revolution in transportation reduced the price of raw materials and reduced the cost of transportation drastically. Coal could now be transported from the mines to the towns for half the price of horse and wagon. Still today, transport on water is the cheapest and most fuel efficient. So since you enterprising young capitalist, you invested the money, you made a tidy profit, you build yourself one nice home anywhere on the map you'd like it to be. Make your nice home a little bit different than your regular homes. And don't forget to construct the canal. It must run parallel to the river. So it has to connect to the river but then run parallel, right? So it cannot go perpendicular to the river. It has to run parallel to the river. Pause the video until you have drawn these things. Round two. It is now 1750. For a variety of different reasons like soap, diet, sanitation, medical care, there is a population explosion in England and in your village. The cursed bubonic plague, which for centuries wiped out your village, has been virtually eliminated due to the disposal of sewage in the canals and ultimately the ocean. So now that we have more population, we need more houses. Add 5 houses. You should have a total of 15. And pause the video until you're done. Round 3. It is 1760. The people of your village need a bit more food and goods to meet the needs of the new inhabitants. Coincidentally, a number of other noteworthy events occurred around 1760. First, a number of new mechanical inventions for farming are developed. Perhaps the greatest impact was Jethro Tull's creation of the seed drill and the horse-drawn cultivator. This is the Second Agricultural Revolution. Also, farmers begin to experiment with new, more productive farming practices like crop rotation, new fertilizers, and new livestock breeding techniques. Consequently, farm production is significantly increased. But there is one problem. Most farmers own one tract of land. Why should they, or how could they, invest in expensive machines when their land was so small? What's more, it's almost impossible to buy land from anyone. At the same time, pressure is placed on Parliament by large and small land-owning families to make more land available. Where is that land going to come from? The Commons, of course. A series of laws called the Enclosure Acts are passed by Parliament. That means that landowners can now buy a piece of common land from the government, thus taking it away from everybody else who used it. So fence off an area 3 by 3 to be reserved as commons. They kept a green space, but a very small one, 3 by 3 inches. And for your, if you're working on smaller paper, it should probably be 2 by 2 or 1 by 1. And now add 5 houses for a total of 20, and one more nice house for the other rich people that are moving to your town. And pause the video until you're ready to move on. Round 4. It is now 1773. A man named Richard Arkwright invents a new machine that can spin and weave cloth 100 times faster than could be done by hand in a farm cottage. That was the most common way of producing cloth up until now, the cottage industry or putting out system. Cottage industry is the AP Human Geography word. Arkwright calls his machine the water frame because its principal source of power was water. So let's imagine that the first water frame was built in your village because of the river. Since the water frame is large, a special building was needed, and thus the first factory for producing cotton cloth was built. So add 1 factory. Because there's no smoke, the water frame is powered by the water. The water frame must be placed on the riverbank. The canal water is not fast enough to generate power, so it has to be on the river. No smoke again, because the coal is not running this factory, the water is. And then add 5 houses for workers at this new factory. And pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is now 1774. Workers are needed to work in this new factory since many people, women, cannot compete with the spinning and weaving of cloth made in the factory, and there are large numbers of poor families who have lost their livelihood due to the Enclosure Acts. We do have an available supply of workers, so people move to your village to find work. Add 15 houses, 1 church, 1 pub, and 1 store. If you feel a need, you may also add additional roads and an extra bridge if you want it. The world is changing. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. Profits from the first textile factory are enormous. It should be no surprise that Richard Arkwright is referred to with 2 titles, the first millionaire and the father of the factory. Many new factories are built in your community. We still haven't discovered coal power, so all your factories must be on the river and not have smoke. The early owners of these factories called themselves capitalists because they had the capital, or the money, to purchase the raw material, the building, the water frame, and pay the workers a fixed wage and make a profit. So that's where the word capitalist comes from. Capital means investment money. So add 5 new factories all on the river, because coal has not really been invented as a source of power yet, or realized as a source of power yet. And add 5 new houses, and pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is 1780. Unemployed workers from surrounding areas flood into your community looking for work. Although wages are very low, these wages look attractive to starving families. Housing is in great demand, and for the first time, a new kind of housing is constructed called tenements. Dozens of families residing under one roof. Add 5 tenements to your city and pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is now 1781. More workers need to live, eat, shop, drink, worship. They need social support services to go on with the demand. So you need to add 1 store, another pub. You guys know what a pub is, right? It's a bar where you drink. 1 church and 1 school. All these for families wealthy enough to send their children, really only boys at this point, to school. Since workers in the factories work 6 days a week, the only day of rest is Sunday. People flock to your churches. That's where they go on Sunday. Sunday morning's church time. So make sure your churches are located in a place that's convenient because they're all still walking. 1 store, 1 pub, 1 church, and 1 school. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is now 1782. Workers work long, hard hours in the factories. The average workday begins at 6 a.m. and ends at 9 p.m. There is only a 30-minute break for lunch. After work, exhausted, stressed out, workers stop at their local pub for some relaxation. Alcohol begins to be consumed throughout England in record amounts. So add 5 more pubs, and now destroy 5 houses so that you can build 4 tenements. So you're going to have to erase 5 houses and build 4 tenements in their place. Destroy 5 houses, that means erase, and in the place where you destroy those houses, draw 4 tenements. And pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is now 1783. Workers barely eke. The word eke means barely get by. Eke out a marginal existence. They are very, very poor. There is never enough money to save, and some workers go into debt. Few, if any, could afford to send their children to school. Still, there are a few families whose lifestyle is quite comfortable, even luxurious. Who are they? These will be your large landowning families and your factory owners, your capitalists. So to your city, add 2 special homes, right? Like your home that you built early for yourself because you built the canal. These handsome manor houses are built, and some are lavishly furnished with art. These nouveau riche, is what we call them en français, are not a part of the aristocratic class of England, but they now can enjoy some of the refinements of the aristocratic rich, like food, servants, furniture, education, fine clothing, carriages, etc. So we're getting to the business class rich. Wealth used to be just inherited, and now you can create wealth due to capitalist pursuits. So in your city, add one more factory and add 15 houses for people who are working in management in the factory, so nicer houses. And from this point on, if you need room, your trees can be cut down, so you can erase your trees if you need room. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. The year is 1785. A man named James Watt invents a new machine called the steam engine. The steam engine replaces the water frame. First, it is far more efficient, and second, it allows factories to be built away from the river. This source of power is much more mobile. Capitalists quickly replace their water frames with steam-powered weaving and spinning machines. And remember what runs steam? Coal. The main business in England is still textile manufacturing, but how they're manufacturing is changing. The factories don't need water anymore. Now they use the steam power, which is run by coal. So add 10 factories and put smoke on them. They don't have to be by the river because they're running on coal now. And now add smoke to your pre-existing factories. Don't move your factories that are by the river, but they're going to start running on coal now because coal is more predictable than the currents of the river. Add one more nice house because people are continuing to get rich. Add 5 more houses to your city, regular houses, and 1 more tenement. Pause until you're ready to move on. The year is 1800. A man named Henry Cort has just invented the puddling process. This process makes it possible for coal, which is fortunately in abundant supply in England, that's why the Industrial Revolution started there, to be used as the primary fuel in the new iron industry. Consequently, your town is thrust into the new age of heavy industry. Larger factory districts appear which manufacture iron at low prices that can easily be transported by your canal that you built long ago. So add 1 new coal mine and 1 new iron bridge to replace the old wooden one, and add 5 houses. The invention of iron is a very important part of the Industrial Revolution because it created the ability to make more permanent machines and things like railroads. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. The year is 1815. Coal miners are busy mining coal. There is a great demand for coal right now. Home heating, fuel for the steam engines, and for the production of iron. So add another coal mine to your town. Although in the 1700s, coal miners were adults who worked in the winter to supplement their wages, so they were farmers during the farming season and then worked in the coal mine in the winters. In the 1800s, the people who work the coal mines are typically children between the ages of 8 and 14. The work of the coal mine is dangerous and unhealthy. Children become victims of black lung, explosions, and accidents. Their growth is stunted as they spend 14 hours of their day stooped over in the mines. They are malnourished and unable to exercise or eat properly. Casualty rates, that means death rates go up. So add 1 cemetery to your town. So you've added another coal mine and 1 cemetery. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is 1820. The existing canals and dirt roads cannot accommodate the heavy industrial traffic. New experiments with transportation using the power of a steam engine are tried. The most successful appears to be a steam engine that pulls a series of wagons or cars on an iron track. This is the first railroad. It's tested and it proves to be quite effective. So they are added all over England. So in your city, add 1 major railroad line, connecting, if it can, all your factories to your coal mines. This is the first place a rail would be built because you want to be able to transport that coal quicker and more efficiently. Right now you're doing it by horse and carriage. So see if you can get a railroad track to connect most of your coal mines to most of your factories. But it has to be 1 continuous tract. Okay? You may build as many railroad bridges as you want, but see if you can get your track to connect. Don't cheat and erase things that don't work. Right? The point of this is to figure out how when urban areas grew, they grew without a plan. Right? So add 1 major railroad line that does its best to connect your factories to your coal mines. Add 5 houses, a total of 70 houses now, for your railroad builders. And pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is now 1827. This new revolution in transportation draws thousands of people to your community. Soon there becomes a surplus of workers. There's too many workers and not enough jobs. Capitalists who wish to ensure their profits decide to hire women and children over men because they can perform the same factory labor, but they don't cost as much, 1/2 to 1/4 the price. More and more children leave their homes to work. Depressed, ashamed, and angry about their wives and children working in the factories and men being unemployed, they turn to crime and the social life in the pub. For the first time in England's history, alcoholism appears in epidemic proportions. It grows substantially. Family life that has existed for hundreds of years in England is disrupted. Family members seldom eat together or see each other. So we're getting social problems of industrialization, drinking, bad conditions in the factories, and workers being treated poorly, women and children working, men not working, and spending their days getting drunk or committing crimes. So you need one jail in your town. You need 2 more pubs. And because there are so many workers that are impoverished, you need 2 more tenements. Add 1 jail, 2 pubs, 2 tenements, and pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is 1835. Using steam engines, iron, and soon steel, manufacturers introduced power-driven machinery in many industries. The production of shoes, clothing, ammunition, and furniture all became mechanized. So did printing and papermaking. People used machines to cut and finish lumber, to process foods, and to even make other machines. Some new inventions and innovation processes had important byproducts. These byproducts often developed into separate industries. For example, iron smelters used coke, a byproduct of coal, to improve the smelting process. Then someone discovered that the gases that coal released during the coke making process could be burned to give light. So during the 1830s in London and other large towns, they became the first communities to pipe in gas to burn streetlights, gas lamps. Soon, all around England, hundreds of towns used gas to light streets and homes. So they replaced fire, burning coal or wood for fire for light, with gas. And this is when we start to light up the night, right? The nights used to be very dark. We did not have electricity. Now we're using gas to create lamps that are a little bit brighter. So add 20 street lamps to your city. Make sure you put them along the streets and choose where you want them to be. You would add the street lamps in places where they'd be most useful. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. It's 1838. Let's take a look at the working conditions in the factories. The 2 predominant factories are textile and iron and steel. Working conditions in either of these 2 were appalling. They were awful. Many workers contracted the deadly factory fever or white lung disease. It was probably a variety of lung ailments like cancer, tuberculosis, emphysema, etc. Other workers were injured on the job in factory accidents. There were no protective railings around the huge moving mechanical parts of the machinery, no safety. Children were weakened from their lack of proper sleep or diet. They often stumbled into the machines and were mutilated. Women with long hair that became undone often found themselves caught in moving machinery. Regardless, if you were unable to work, you were fired. So there was no workers' comp. There was no time to heal. You just lost your job. There was no health insurance. There was always a daily line of unemployed workers waiting to fill the job that you were leaving if you were sick. So you didn't call in sick, and you tried to work even if you were hurt. So now you need to add 2 hospitals and 1 more cemetery. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. Now it's 1840. There's a need for quicker transportation. Coal, iron, finished products, and raw materials must all be transported from one area of England to another. In Ireland in the late 1830s, a devastating potato famine drove hundreds of thousands of Irish to England. What's it called when you move from one place to another? I hope you said migration. And if you're leaving a place because of a famine, if there's not enough food in a place, what kind of factor is that? I hope you're saying push, because it pushes you out, but you're being pulled by the factor of opportunity and food in the New World. So people are migrating to your town. Add 1 more railroad line passing east to west through your town. Add 5 houses. You should have a total of 75 houses now. And 1 tenement for the new railroad workers. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is 1842. There are some advantages to urban dwellers. City life is very different from country life. There's a small but growing middle class, and a whole new cultural life is available. Museums, theater, opera, restaurants, plays, and concerts, all of that is made available to city dwellers. Before, only the aristocrats could afford arts, but now the middle class enjoys the fine life of culture and good living. So add one theater and one museum. Add 2 private schools, private means you pay tuition, for the upper class students. Mark these schools with the letter P, and add 1 nice house. So we're developing a middle class. We're developing a group of people who aren't rich, but they aren't poor. So we need entertainment and schools for them. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. It is 1845. There's no pollution control, so the air in your community is dark. Windows, walls, even trees are covered with layers of soot and coke. I hope you know what soot is. Ashes. If you've ever burned wood, that ash that is left when you're done flies into the air and is called soot, and it's grimy and disgusting. The river that once flowed through your quiet village for hundreds of years is now unfit for drinking, bathing, or even laundry. The factories have been dumping waste into the rivers. A new disease begins to take the lives of people. Malignant tumors grow in people's bodies, and the term cancer is first used in the medical profession. Think of your demographic transition model and your epidemiological transition model. Right? People are living longer, so the things that used to kill them when they were young are now not killing them, and now we've discovered something called cancer. It can either be because people are living longer, or it could be because of the environment they live in. Likely a combination of both. The average life expectancy for the poor classes is now 30 years of age. Your city is overcrowded and shrouded in factory smoke. The poor classes, the very, very poor, the rich people are living longer. The noises, the loss of privacy, the loss of family unit shatters the peace of the old ways. Suicide rates double and then triple. So add 1 cemetery, 1 jail, and 1 hospital to accommodate the victims of urban life. Pause the video until you're ready to continue. It is 1850. By this year, several million acres of good English land has been enclosed and sold to private parties who own large estates. Despite the misery this creates for England's landless poor, the economy benefits to the rich are obvious. These farmers purchase the newest power-driven machinery and can easily feed the working class of England with the food they produce, including the Irish. The small landowning farmer is crushed in by the enclosed commons. They cannot afford the machinery and therefore cannot compete and grow food profitably. So we're starting to have commercial agriculture, which requires large amounts of land controlled by one person or one company. Thousands of these poor, small landowning farmers leave their villages where their ancestors had lived for hundreds of years and move to towns and cities looking for work to feed their families. Some refused to leave but took jobs working for the large land-owning farmers. By the thousands, though, they moved into the bleak, soot-covered, uninviting towns of the north, the factory towns and the new cotton mills. This is what your town is. Your town is a factory town of the north. So add 20 houses. You should have a total of 95 houses now. 5 tenements, 2 stores, 1 church, 5 factories, 1 pub, 2 more nice houses, and 1 special house for the richest person. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. Okay, here's your city. Take a look at it. And had you known when we started where we were going, would you have made different decisions about where to put things? That is the point of this simulation, is that cities tended to grow willy-nilly like yours did. Nobody could predict the future and plan the city. So cities that are ancient and old are not planned. Cities like Shenzhen are planned. They planned for this to become a giant city. So they have built it specifically for that. But cities that kind of grew up out of ancient times are not like that. All right, here are some general analysis questions to help you analyze how your city manages itself. We will do industry today, and then after we cover the urban unit, we will come back to your city and talk about services and overall urban design. based on what we learn about city services and urban design. So you need to make sure you keep your map, your city drawing, your city map, until we finish the urban unit. So first, what problems do you feel your city presents for the citizens that live there? Make a list. So make a list of your problems. You don't have to do this on your map paper. You can do this in a separate file. And then make sure you save it, because we're not going to turn it in until after the urban unit is done. What benefits do you feel your city provides its citizens? So what's good about your city? What's bad about your city? What geographic advantages does your town's location provide? Are there any disadvantages? Those are the general questions. And then industry analysis questions. There are 10 of them. What industries are present in your city? Why do these particular industries exist here? Where did you place your raw materials needed by your industry, and why did you put them there? And if you don't have a reason, say that. I didn't think about where I put them, but I would now. What infrastructure was built to accommodate your industry? What factors determine where transportation infrastructure was built? Transportation infrastructure, again, is roads and railroads. Infrastructure is things like services, hospitals, yes, jails. What problems do you see in the placement of your infrastructure, and what would you change about its placement if you could? Where did you place your manufacturing processes, your factories, and why did you put them there? Did the location of your factories change? Why did it change? What geographic problems or obstacles did you face with factory placement? So analyze the placement of your factories using vocabulary and rules of the least cost theory. And I hope you're in your head coming up with a triangle, right? This is Weber, least cost theory. Do your factories follow this pattern? Why or why not? You can either copy these questions and answer them, or you can restate the question in your answer. And remember, save this document, because we're going to come back to it at the end of the industry unit and come back to your city again and analyze what we see based on what we've learned in the urban unit. So we're going to pause for now to learn some new things. What I want you to do is upload a JPEG of your city to the shared PowerPoint at the link that's on the video. This PowerPoint is also attached to the assignment. Okay, and I'll put this link in the instructions to the assignment as well. So upload your city to the shared PowerPoint. Make sure your name is on the slide. Take a picture of it. Make sure your picture is good enough that we can see some details. I'm really eager to see what all of your cities look like and compare them to what everybody else did. And be sure to save the paper copy of your city and save the answers to your questions, because after the urban unit, we're going to come back to this and finish it. Have a great day.